Hello everyone, it's MotherGeek here. Welcome to my YouTube Christmas book advent. It's time to open another book. I wonder which one we're reading today. Let's see. Making Angels in the Snow and Other Christmas Stories, published by Miles Kelly. This book contains 4 stories: The Beaver's Christmas Tree, Making Angels in the Snow, The Wildwood in Winter, and Jimmy Scarecrow's Christmas. Today I'm just going to be reading the story which is featured in the title of the book, Making Angels in the Snow. Making Angels in the Snow, an extract from Raggedy Andy Stories by Johnny Gruelle. "Whee! It's good to be back home again," said Raggedy Andy to the other dolls, as he stretched his feet out in front of the little toy stove and rubbed his rag hands briskly together, as if to warm them through. All the dolls laughed at Raggedy Andy for doing this, for they knew they had never been a fire in the little toy stove. "We are so glad and happy to have you back home again with us," the dolls told Raggedy Andy. "Well," Raggedy Andy replied, as he held his rag hands over the tiny lid of the stove and rubbed them again, "I have missed all of you and wished many times that you had been with me." And as Raggedy Andy continued to hold his hands over the little stove, Uncle Clem asked him why he did it. Raggedy Andy smiled and leaned back in his chair. "Really," he said, "I wasn't paying any attention. I've spent so much of my time while I was away drying out my soft cotton stuffing, it seems as though it has almost become a habit." "Were you wet most of the time, Raggedy Andy?" the French doll asked. "Nearly all the time," Raggedy Andy replied. "First I would get sopping wet, and then I'd freeze." "Freeze?" exclaimed all the dolls together in one breath. "Dear me, yes," Raggedy Andy laughed. "Just see here!" And he pulled his sleeves up and showed the dolls where his rag arm had been mended. "That's quite a rip!" The dolls gathered around Raggedy Andy and examined the rip in his rag arm. "It's all right now," he laughed, "but you should have seen me when it happened. I was frozen into one solid cake of ice all the way through, and when Marcella tried to limber up my arm before it had thawed out, it went pop and just burst. Then I was placed in a pan of nice warm water until the icy cotton inside me had melted, and then I was hung up on a line above the kitchen stove, out at Grandma's." "But how did you happen to get so wet and then freeze?" asked Raggedy Ann. "Out across the road from Grandma's home, way out in the country, there is a lovely pond," Raggedy Andy explained. "When Marcella and I went to Grandma's last week, Grandma met us with the sleigh, for the ground was covered with starry snow. The pretty pond was covered with ice too, and upon the ice was a soft blanket of white snow. It was so beautiful," said Raggedy Andy. "Grandma had a lovely new sled for Marcella, a red one with shiny runners. It was heaps of fun, for there was a little hill at one end of the pond, so that when we coasted down we went scooting across the pond like an arrow. Marcella would turn the sled sideways just for fun, and she and I would fall off and go sliding across the ice up on our backs. Then Marcella showed me how to make angels in the soft snow." "Oh, tell us how, Raggedy Andy!" shouted all the dollies. "It's very easy," said Raggedy Andy. "Marcella would lie down upon her back in the snow and put her hands back up over her head. Then she would bring her hands in a circle down to her sides like this." And Raggedy Andy lay up on the floor of the nursery and showed the dollies just how it was done. "Then," he added, "when she stood up, it would leave a print of her body and legs in the white snow, and where she had swooped her arms, there were angels' wings." "It must have looked just like an angel," said Uncle Clem. "Indeed, it was very pretty," Raggedy Andy answered. "Then Marcella made a lot of angels by placing me in the snow and working my arms. So you see, what with falling off the sled so much and making so many angels, Marcella and I were both wet, but I was completely soaked through. My cotton just became soppy and I was ever so much heavier. Just as we were having the most delightful time, Grandma came to the door and oohooed to Marcella to come and get a nice new doughnut. So Marcella, thinking to return in a minute, left me lying upon the sled and ran through the snow to Grandma's, and there I stayed until I began to feel stiff, and I could feel the cotton inside me begin to freeze. I lay up on the sled till after the sun went down, After it had been dark for some time, I heard someone coming through the snow, and I could see the yellow light of a lantern. It was Grandma. She pulled the sled over, and then she picked me up and took me inside. "He's frozen as stiff as a board," she told Marcella as she handed me to her. Marcella did not say why she had forgotten to come for me, but I found out afterwards that it was because she was so wet. Grandma made her change her clothes and shoes, and would not permit her to go outside and play again. "Well, anyway," concluded Raggedy Andy, "that is the way it went all the time we were out at Grandma's. I was wet nearly all the time, but I wish you could all have been with me to share in the fun." Raggedy Andy again leaned over the little toy stove and rubbed his rag hands briskly together. Uncle Clem went to the waste paper basket and came back with some scraps of yellow and red paper. Then, taking off one of the tiny lids, he stuffed the paper in part of the way, as if flames were shooting up. Then, as all the dolls laughed, Raggedy Andy stopped rubbing his hands, caught Raggedy Ann about the waist, and went skipping across the nursery floor with her. The end. Thanks for watching. Check back tomorrow for another story.